Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'd like to make a toast. Bradley, I have questions. Oh, you're probably wondering why I brought you all here, aren't you? No, I know why we're here. What I'd like to know is why we're all suddenly animals dressed in what I must admit is very fashionable clothing. Oh, yeah, I forgot this is only audio. No one can see that I'm actually a rabbit in a burgundy vest. Yes, and I'm a crow with a monocle. Ha, perhaps I shouldn't have eaten those mushrooms.
I am a turtle in a three-piece suit, just in case anyone cares.
We are fishies!
I don't want to be a fishies. We eat fishies.
I'm a bear. I see that, Arnold, but where is your outfit?
What are you talking about? Bears don't wear clothes.
Fair point. Hey, who invited the big fat toad? Whoa, hey, let's not be disrespectful. Otter announcers and matching t-shirts? No, that's the frog's name. It writes haiku. Oh, that's right. This week's guest, Tim Yagutzinski, has a haiku magazine called Big Fat Toad. Mr. Toad, would you like to read us a sample haiku? Anybody speak Toad? I didn't get that.
I believe he said that October's issue is open for submissions.
Oh, well, hey, that's helpful. Hey, Bradley, weren't you supposed to be doing a toast? Oh, right, thanks, Finton. My friends, here's to all you listening right now. This week, the Save This Draft podcast crossed 20,000 total downloads. So thank you so much for listening.
Ooh, that's great. So, when do we get paid?
I said the title. Let's roll the intro music. You know, he brings up a good point. When are you going to pay me for all those Devine stories that I've narrated? Roll the intro music!
Wait, we're supposed to be getting paid?
Future Bradley, I know you think this is funny, but I'm in serious danger right now! Roll the intro music! Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 35 of the Save This Draft podcast. Sorry if that intro got a little heated at the end. I like to put the fear of me into, well, me. I gotta make sure he knows who's in charge. Jokes aside, the podcast did indeed cross a huge milestone this week. As of this writing, we are at over 20.5k total downloads since the show started. Absolutely insane, but I am so grateful to all of you listening for letting me feature your work each week and to let me bombard you with my weird intros while I'm at it. Working on this show is a lot of fun, and I love interviewing new writers each week, so thank you again for listening. Oh, and speaking of writers, this week's guest is a prolific poet, podcaster, and photographer by the name of Tim Yagutzinski. We had an amazing conversation about his inspirations, his latest poetry collection that he recently published, and much, much more, so stay tuned for that later in this very episode. I also want to take a second before we head into this week's shoutouts to thank everyone who showed up for the premiere of the first ever Devine series. Chapter 1 of The Order of the Pawn is out right now, and new episodes will debut every 2 weeks. I've also received some great feedback thus far that I'll be using to improve the series as it goes on. And don't forget, if you haven't read the 6 Devine preludes, you can check those out while you wait for Chapter 2 to get yourself better acquainted with the characters of the series. Also, I'd like to share some news about a new Kickstarter that went live this week. One of the amazing writers in our community, L.M. Cypher, just launched a Kickstarter to fund an audiobook version of her upcoming debut novel, The Serpent's Rise. I've got a copy of the book pre-ordered myself, but this Kickstarter campaign would help fund a fully produced audio version complete with all the bells and whistles you'd expect from a modern production. Audiobooks are a great way to reach more listeners, and as someone who does a lot of narration for my own work, I'd love to listen to this novel as well. If you're a fan of audiobooks and you'd like to support a fellow indie author, check the show notes for a link to the Kickstarter. It already has 5 backers and 59 days to go, so every little bit helps. Alright, and with that, let's get into this week's shoutouts. But first, a word from this week's fictional sponsor. Today's episode of the Save This Draft podcast is brought to you by Haiku Highway Buddy.
Are you tired of your old, boring GPS?
In 2 miles, turn right. Absolutely. It's so lifeless.
Do you wish your GPS delivered your instructions in a more calm and poetic way?
Yes! I want to think about profound stuff like my place in the universe while I'm driving.
Introducing the Haiku Highway Buddy, the first GPS to deliver all of your instructions in a traditional form of Japanese poetry. Gone are the days of boring instructions. Now you can interpret your Haiku Highway Buddy while trying to navigate roads you've never been on before.
Continue driving. Turn toward the horizon. Your journey ends there.
Wait, hang on a second. What does that even mean?
You are lost today, wandering the endless road, alone in the world.
What? Hey, somebody help me!
Nothing says quality road trip like an existential crisis while going 70 miles per hour.
Speed is a construct. Embrace the unknown ahead, or just pull over.
Hey, shut up! You're not helping! God, where am I?
Get lost and find yourself with the Haiku Highway Buddy. Order yours today!
Alright, and we're back. Every week on Tuesdays, I open a weekly shoutouts thread in my subscriber chat for people to share their work. I usually pick 5 at random to talk about on the show here, complete with a narrated excerpt that I enjoyed, but this week we're doing 7 of them to celebrate 20,000 downloads for the show. So without further ado, here are this week's shoutouts. First this week is Broken Bones, A Broken System, 40 Days of Saving Dad by Patty B. Patty's work is always amazing. Her writing voice is genuine, authentic, and always relatable. She shares real stories, and this one was a tough one. It was a story about her elderly father falling and the ensuing journey that he went on to try and get surgery, treatment, and some semblance of care in the modern U.S. healthcare system. As you can probably imagine, it did not go well. Patty recounts the first few times genuine people tried to help him, but she also shines light on an industry that is understaffed, underfunded, and overwhelmed. I myself have had plenty of bad experiences with healthcare, going all the way back to my childhood. If I'm honest, it took away a lot of my trust in people and professionals that I thought were there to help us. Are they all bad? No. But even the best people break under the right circumstances. This was a hard story to read, but it's an important one. Here's an excerpt. But in most of these situations, there's always one helper, one hero. This time, it was an ER nurse who ran around all day and night triaging dying patients. This was a man who had found his calling, who loved his job and the adrenaline rushes that fueled him. He took time to explain to me that my father had broken his back and the base of his neck, fractured his hip, needed stitches across his bleeding head, and probably had a TBI or a traumatic brain injury. Then he told me that people can live with broken backs and broken necks, and that fractured hips can be replaced, even in elderly people. He gave me just enough hope to carry me through the next several days. Thank you to Patty for sharing this one. Check the show notes for a link. Second this week is Apparition by Daniel Coates. This story is told from the perspective of a child in first grade, and while it starts innocent and sweet, it quickly becomes clear that something is wrong. I don't want to spoil the story at all, but suffice to say, I could feel my heart sinking lower and lower as I kept reading. The confusion in the narrator's voice, the concern, it started chipping away at my resolve. All I wanted to do by the end was just reach out and give him a hug. I wanted to tell him it was going to be okay, even though I had no way of knowing that. It's such a beautiful piece, and it's terribly heartbreaking, but the way that it never breaks that immersion is just brilliant. Even by the end, it manages to break the fourth wall and simultaneously my resolve. I was definitely crying by the end of this one. Here's an excerpt. I was playing with my friends, Trish, Chester, and Alicia. We were in the woods between Alicia's house and mine. We were playing knights. Chester wanted to be the dragon. We had to kill him and save the world. We used sticks as swords, and he threw dirt so we could be on fire. I was on fire and trying to run and find water when I slipped and fell off the rocks above the creek. Really impressive work from Daniel on this one. Check the show notes for a link to this one as well. Third this week is Drum Sounds by Hazel Allen. If you ask me who my top 10 poets of all time are, Hazel will always make that list, and this poem is a perfect example of why. This piece blends prose into poetry, but the poem itself is the star of the show. It's a piece about how, despite everything that happens to us, time marches forward. In this case, a drum and its beat is the stand-in for the march of time. I loved how this piece used the sound of the drum as well to set the rhythm of certain stanzas. Another takeaway I got from this poem is that progress, growth, and healing aren't linear. That drum beat of time will march ever forward, but as people, we have periods of growth, periods of healing, and moments when we regress. It's all part of being human. Here's an excerpt. I hear a sound that feels like violence, but the room around me has gone. My hands buried into my face in silence, unable to drown out the sad songs. Because here I am again, drowning inside my mess-ups, only moving forward because a drum tells me to. Beautiful work from Hazel, as always. You know what to do. Check the show notes for a link. Fourth this week is Gutted Hopefully by Edward Marlowe Ruiz. So this piece was written in about 30 minutes according to Edward, and this is an example of what happens when you just let go of trying to be perfect and let the words flow. More often than not, you get something even better than you could have imagined, and that's certainly the case here. The concept is a note left by someone who was executed by hanging. It's sort of a final message. What makes this piece so special is a lot of things, but it's the combination of word choice, of poetic and profound phrases, and the wholly unique voice that permeates throughout that really made it rise above the sum of its parts. Everything about this is gold, but taken together it becomes a diamond. This is what happens when you let go and embrace the process. This piece feels truly like someone from the depths of time reached out and used Edward to deliver their message. It's incredible how one author can constantly shift and evolve to match the needs of every story they write. It's times like these that I'm truly humbled by the talent that surrounds me on this platform. This was simply incredible. Here's an excerpt. Dig for the curse, tear it out, spit on it, then throw it to the flames. Emptiness is all too much. It must die a fiery death, not a slackened one. But I fear the pain in my courage is second to last. My final wishes. To the woman who stole my songs, choke on them. When I am expunged into earth or dust, grant me a farewell echoed only by a troubadour themselves, and may thee burn or bury the lute as well. I need it for the journey. I literally just got chills. Incredible. Dive into this one as soon as you're done listening, and I promise you'll enjoy it. Link in the show notes. Our fifth shout out this week is The Walls by Anthony Michael Malik. Anthony is someone who I recently met here on Substack, and I discovered him through a piece that he narrated for Nikki the Nocturnal Narrator, who was on the show a few weeks back. Anthony is that rare combination of a multidisciplined artist that I love to see. He's not only an extremely talented voice actor, but he's a very good writer as well. This piece is a wonderful descent into madness, made even better by his pitch-perfect performance. He brings the words to life with the subtle shifts in his voice and tone, so I highly recommend you listen while reading along for this one. Here's an excerpt, but know again that I won't be doing it justice here. You need to hear his version for yourself. My fingers close around the hammer. My body aches as I lift it above my head and bring it down, and up, and down, and up, and down, and... The dust from the drywall settles, and I brace myself for attack. The flood of insectile gods that will surely rain down upon me. But there is nothing. No, not nothing. Something has come out of this hole in the wall. Truly haunting. Check the show notes for a link, and if you'd like to hire Anthony to narrate your work, be sure to send them a message. Our first of 2 bonus shoutouts this week goes to The Feed by J.A. Evans. I love stories that subvert expectations, and this one absolutely nails that. It has a colorful and vibrant image, and the opening is bright and cheerful. Quickly, though, things take a dark turn, and we find out that our protagonist is addicted to a drug that makes everything seem nice and beautiful, but once it wears off, we catch a glimpse of the real world. The shift in tone, the world building, the gritty setting, it's all amazing here. I love the atmospheric imagery and the sharp dialogue as well. The note at the end about how this was inspired by the drug that is social media is also spot on and quite powerful when you think about it. Here's an excerpt I enjoyed. Judgment bore into me from every gaze. I know, I said. I shouldn't have. Sanchez, for the last time, stand down, Lee demanded. The large man took a seat on the other side of the room. Lee turned to me. How many times? How many times? My hands trembled. I couldn't meet her eyes. How many times have you taken it? I looked up, my eyes meeting hers. I could feel the men staring, guns ready. I needed her to hear me, to believe me. I wasn't ready to die. I said, Just this time. Once. I swear. Sanchez snapped from the other side of the room. Junkies lie, Sarge, you know that. His pistol sat on the arm of the chair. His fingers rested on the trigger, held back by Lee's words. He wouldn't need to pick it up. A small squeeze would suffice. He wanted me to know this. You know, I immediately subscribed after reading this, and you should too. Check the show notes for a link. Our second bonus shout out this week is Goes Walking by Connor Connors. The first thing you'll notice about this one is the formatting. It has these uniform line lengths that make the piece appear like a uniform column when you're looking at it. I really like that visual. And as I started reading, I found that the shortened lines really locked in the pace of the story from a reader's perspective. It's a story that moves quickly, but the construction of it adds to that and complements it. The push and pull of the pursuit in the story here also benefits from the structure. It's a short but really unique piece. Here's an excerpt. How easy it would be now to run and knock her down. I work hard to keep from playing games, with my feet rapping out a fast staccato rhythm, slapping the pace of an erratic jog. The woman shifts nervously from wall to wall. I let my right leg drag behind me, the left stepping hard, sounding the irregular hiss and talk of a limping madman. Very cool. And thank you to everyone who submitted links this week. We'll be back with our weekly Power Up Prompt stories right after this short message.
The end.
What? What do you mean it's over?
That is the end of the story, I'm afraid. Stories, after all, only end one way.
We don't like scissorts. We want multiple endings. Yeah, we want choices. Ooh, and music.
I apologize, but that is simply not possible.
Haha, maybe not for you.
Oh my, who are you?
My name is Bradley Ramsey, and I'm an author with Audio Mazes, a brand new platform that produces immersive audio dramas with professional voice acting and narration. Experience branching narratives where you get to decide what happens next, try different paths, and reach multiple endings. You can even unlock achievements.
Ooh, we like achievements. Yes, precious. We want to unlock them all.
Well, with an Audio Mazes subscription, you can! Enjoy a wide range of genres and stories, with new titles added weekly. Listen to as many as you want, with one monthly subscription.
Dear me, I must say that sounds quite wonderful.
It is, and if you sign up now, you can check out not one, not two, but 3 stories on Audio Mazes written by yours truly. Experience an action-packed dragon adventure in Dragon's Domain, or dive into the world of a tabletop role-playing game in Return to Ragnarok. And most recently, I helped write Light, Hope, and Stardust, a story about human connection, mental health, and hope. And beyond my stories, there are tons of authors on Audio Mazes writing incredible works in all types of genres like fantasy, science fiction, romance, and even horror.
Yay! We want to go to the Audio Mazes! Yes, give us the achievements, precious.
Enter a world where your decisions drive the story. Head on over to audiomazes.com and enter the maze today. All right, and we're back. And one thing I'll say is that this episode is not sponsored by Audio Mazes, but I really wanted to do a commercial for them because I love working with them and I really believe in what they're doing, and I think it could change the publishing industry for the better. They really believe in supporting writers, narrators, voice actors, and artists, so I'm proud to be a part of what they're doing and wanted to give them a shout out. Okay, and on this week's Power Up Prompt, we did science fiction. Your setting was the simulation, your character was the enlightened one, and your conflict was a glitch in the system. Let's dive in and see what everyone came up with. First up is Mara by J.M. Gooding. J.M.'s stories just honestly keep getting better and better. The way things slowly devolved in the beginning of this was brilliant and unsettling, and then the story switches into this immersive format that juxtaposes coding language with emotional prose, and it all builds towards a final note at the end that talks about the concept of emergence as defined by post-emergence science fiction, and that little snippet really does add context to everything you've just read. It's a story that crosses into the uncanny before veering into the scientific and the theoretical, ultimately pulling us back into the realm of pure emotion and the longing for peace and stability by the end. It's a multifaceted experience, and honestly, I'm going to be thinking about it for a long time. Great work. Next this week, we've got A Made Man by C.J. Knight, aka Terrifying Tales. This one was super cool. It starts out with some atmospheric imagery and some great setup to get us immersed in the world before it dives into the action headfirst. It's very Sopranos feeling with the organized crime angle, but just when you think you've got it figured out, CJ throws a curveball in the form of the simulation setting from this week's prompt. There's an insanely cool scene with what Doctor Who would call timey-wimey stuff, and then the story leaves us with a super compelling ending. I really like the mashup of genres here, and that was another element of the Power Up prompt this week, so nice job on CJ for including that bonus. The combination here of classic mobster storytelling with a sci-fi twist was done expertly. This author just keeps posting wins, and I love to see it. Next up, we have Cup of Illusions by Hazel Allen. I'm telling you, when Hazel does a short story, it's always going to be something special. They normally do poetry, but it's a rare treat when a new story comes out. And don't get me wrong, their poetry, as I said earlier, some of the best I've ever read. But their approach to storytelling always brings together unique elements and characters. This piece is no different. It's a mashup of sci-fi and comedy, and it does several things at once. It fully addresses the power-up prompt this week. It also addresses Bookstack's recent prompt, and it does something wild with the ending that fans of Hazel's work like myself are going to love. I don't want to spoil it here, but if you finish reading this one and you haven't read the other stories that Hazel connected to from this one, do yourself a favor and check them out. They're much different in tone, but the connection is just way too cool not to experience firsthand. Our next power-up prompt story this week is The Reality Bends by Jennifer Jorgensen. If you've been listening to the show in the last few weeks, then you've probably heard me singing this author's praises. That's because her work is phenomenal, every single time. This story is side-splittingly funny and wildly creative. It throws us into the simulation setting, but things are chaotic as the entire thing seems to be glitching out. The action is wild, but it's the writing and the jokes that had me crying from laughter by the end. If you're a fan of Douglas Adams and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, this is a must-read. I need to read you a paragraph from this story real quick. A squirrel the size of a German shepherd stood upright, waving a badge at Ensign Palta like it had jurisdiction and smelling of wet dog. Beside them, a knight in gleaming plate was going toe-to-toe with a cyborg wielding a plasma halberd. I had no idea who was winning, but physics was definitely losing. I love that line at the end about physics losing. It's such a fun read. A huge shout out to Jennifer for always bringing your A game to these prompts. Seriously, it's amazing, this talent we have in our community. I just love it. Next up, we have The Amber Codex by Brenda. This one took me by surprise because of its massive scope. The story follows a character through childhood and into their adult life, taking us deep into a world that combines elements of sci-fi and fantasy. The world building here is also excellent. It combines beautifully with the scope of the story and gives us an in-depth look into the nature of reality while slowly dropping hints as to the nature of everything else that's going on. It's a story that really comes together as an experience. Great work from Brenda. Next we have Is This by Mary Ellen Brady. This story is another excellent submission from Mary Ellen, and it once again pushes the envelope as her work often does. In this piece, we not only get a beautifully realized simulation setting, but we also get a glimpse into alternate simulations and realities, with the truth existing somewhere beyond all of them. That mystery and intrigue is balanced nicely by the interactions we get between our protagonist and a dragon named Bex. Mary Ellen even included some sound bites as well, so we can hear what Bex's chirping sounds like. I really love it when authors add immersive elements like this, so that was really cool to see. If you're a fan of Mary Ellen's work, you'll definitely enjoy this one. And if you're not a fan, well, now's a good time to start reading this incredible author. Moving right along, next we've got NPC Man's Land by Hutchinson Adams. As a lifelong gamer myself, I really liked how this story kept things grounded, but snuck in other things like a med kit and an inventory system. It gives everything a almost uncanny feel, but in a really cool way. It also brings up some really compelling philosophical questions regarding the nature of war when you're in a simulation like this. I don't want to spoil that here, but if you like gritty and realistic stories matched with fantastic sci-fi elements, you'll want to check this one out for sure. Our next power-up prompt story is a new author to this prompt series, and this piece is The Dream Protocol by Tom Keown. Tom's one of those authors that has a truly distinct and captivating writing style. The story in particular reads like a poetic fever dream. The imagery and descriptions are haunting and beautiful in equal measure. Meanwhile, the shifting landscape and winding paths keep reminding us that we're not in a reality we know or recognize. It's really a hypnotic experience. I'd really recommend checking it out. It was cool. Next, we've got TBD by Javier Mixco. I love how this post in the subtitle says a hooky tagline. So I immediately love this story because of the way it switches into a meta-narrative after the first paragraph. We get this opening that's thick with atmosphere like I've come to expect from Javier, but then the font changes and we're suddenly an author looking at a draft of their own story. It's a really nice perspective shift. As the story goes on, there's even struck out text indicating the author POV has been editing the story as we are reading. And I just finished reading it, and I gotta say, this is my new favorite power-up prompt story of all time. This is number one. Dear Lord, the story continues to lean into that meta POV as you go on, and it just has this incredible effect. It goes all the way with the execution and leaves you with a mic drop of an ending. Honestly, I'm a sucker for this kind of writing and storytelling, and I've experimented with similar ideas in my story, like the one about the fictional video game The Eternal Hunt, but that pales in comparison to what Javier did here. This was genius. Remember, links to all these are in the show notes, and you have got to check this one out. Our next story is Aware by Anton Anderson. If you're a fan of Black Mirror, let me just say that this story will be right up your alley. It starts out with plenty of confusion and uncertainty, but then it weaves in the simulation setting from this week's prompt and drops detail after detail that will leave you drowning in dread as it goes on. It's the kind of story that will give you an existential crisis, while it barrels toward an absolutely chilling conclusion. Masterfully constructed and horrifying in equal measure, this was a really nice entry from Anton this week. Next we have The End of All Digital Things by Hadean Veridicus. This story is set within the Hadean Collapse, which is a larger world-building project, but it also works well as a standalone story. It's a very epic sci-fi tale. The scope is monumental, both in time and sheer space that it covers. The descriptions are broad and expansive, but it also helps you immerse yourself as it goes on. I also loved how the ending dropped all kinds of huge implications for the rest of this universe, and what could potentially happen in other stories. If you're a big fan of bold and bombastic sci-fi, this is definitely one you want to read. Our next story is 7 Minutes by Mina Howell. This story comes with some significant content warnings, and I won't touch on the sensitive stuff here, but the concept alone is quite beautiful. It's a story about loss, about grief, and about a person's final moments. The story introduces us early on to the concept that our brains keep working for 7 minutes after our heart stops. It's a beautiful and poetic and fascinating, honestly, narrative device, but as the story goes on, things get sad, then they get really sad, and then they get more than a little dark. But right at the end, in those 7 minutes, we get a glimpse of something. Is it reality? Are we leaving the simulation in those 7 minutes? Or could it be that the simulation is giving us one last moment before we're all reduced to data? I don't know. And the story doesn't explicitly tell us, which I think is important here. We're not supposed to know. I think the takeaway from the story is to live like you've only got 7 minutes left. Enjoy every moment. Be present, because the present is all you have. Beautiful work from Mina here. Her stories and poetry never cease to amaze. An incredible submission for this week's prompt. Our next Power Up prompt story this week is 9 Candles by Saif. This piece is really unique because it's told from the perspective of a 9-year-old girl on her birthday. The only problem? Her birthday keeps repeating. Every day she wakes up and it's the same day. As you can imagine, she tries to ask for help, but people blow her off because she's just a child. Things continue to escalate into a horrifying conclusion that left my jaw on the floor. Our final power-up prompt story this week is Hell Cage by Daniel Coates. This story has a really cool premise. It's about a prison where inmates are kept in a simulation until it's time for them to be released. In the story, a prisoner is set for release, but the AI in control of the simulation isn't working, so the warden has to go in himself to let the prisoner out. To do so, he has a tool that looks like a gun in the simulation. One shot from the gun and the prisoner will wake up. As you can imagine, things don't go quite as planned, and the ending is pretty chilling. I like the creativity in this one. The premise was awesome. It was a very cool entry. And thank you to everyone who submitted stories of the Power Up prompt this week. You're really knocking it out of the park lately, and it's incredible to see. Make sure you check the show notes for links to all of these, and stay tuned for next week's Power Up prompt tomorrow. Next up is our weekly writing discussion right after a quick Mindful Moment. Hey there, this is Chill Bradley, here for this week's Mindful Moment. Here's a quote to consider. Self-destruction means self-creation, means survival. M. Ann Avera. If that name sounds familiar, it's because M. Ann Avera is a poet and writer on Substack. That quote is from her poetry collection entitled Complete and Total Honesty. Complete and Total Honesty is a brutal, lyrical, and unflinching exploration of survival, faith, madness, and love. It's a 5-part poetic descent into the American South, mental illness, addiction, womanhood, and the sacred violence of becoming, and it's available now for just $10. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Let me ask you something. How much do you think your work is worth? $5? 10? 20? I'm here to tell you something. Whatever number you just thought of, it's correct. Your work, your writing, your art, it's worth paying for. M. Ann Avera posted earlier this week saying that a family member told her that her book wasn't worth $10. I think everyone listening to this right now would disagree. I know I did, because I bought a copy right after reading that. Family and friends should always support us and our work, but sometimes that's not the case. In moments like that, it's important that we look to each other and show our fellow writers that their work is worth paying for. So please, if you can, check the show notes for a link to purchase your copy of Complete and Total Honesty today. Thank you for listening. Back to the show. All right, and we're back. For this week's writing discussion, I asked you all to share your sources of inspiration. Where do you go? What do you do? And what sparks new ideas in your beautiful writer minds? Let's dive in and see what folks in the community had to say. Mina Howell says, my methods may be a bit unorthodox. I get a lot of inspiration from my old friend the Void, my dreams. I'm an extremely lucid dreamer, and I actually have a whole book worth of dreams written into stories. Other than that, though, my inspiration is very random. I could be driving, playing a video game, or even doing the dishes and get hit with a bolt of inspiration that I have no choice but to utilize. I love this. Mina brings up a great point about using our dreams for inspiration. I unfortunately get a lot of really bad nightmares myself due to some trauma that I've been through, but they do make for good horror stories when I turn them into something productive. I'm also someone who definitely tends to get inspired while playing games, doing dishes, or taking a shower, so I'm glad I'm not the only one. Next up, Verdant Butterfly says, I've carved out a part of the day just for myself, from 4:30 to 5:30. I write uninterrupted because, let's be honest, nothing sane stirs that early. I brew a tea, coffee, or sometimes even a ghost energy drink because, for some of us, quiet inspiration only arrives courtesy of copious caffeine. A light snack follows, berries, toast, or Jaffa cakes. Then I flick on the lights, check Substack for messages, comments, and stories to read later, and settle in to write. Notebook and Sharpie gel pen if I'm creating something new, keyboard if I'm editing. I'll write on and off throughout the day, but that early hour is mine alone, no guilt, no pressure, just me and my thoughts. Beautiful. I love the ritual here. That's such an important approach because it helps your mind know when it's time to be creative. And once you build in that habit, you'll find the switch is a lot easier to flip when you need to shift into creative mode. Next up, Javier Mixco says, cool question because it isn't exactly where do you get your story ideas, it's how do you get inspired. It's more of a question of how and a why than a what. For me, it's great art of any kind. Sometimes it's a great song, a piece of art or a photograph, a movie, or more often a line from a movie or TV show. Sometimes it's a dream or a random memory that pops in my head that makes me emotional or wants to explore an emotion. I always get inspired seeing other great artists and writers pouring their hearts and souls into their work for the pure love of it. Substack has been a revelation for me in this regard. The sheer quality and quantity of talent on here is mind-blowing and definitely inspiring. I couldn't agree more with Javier's input here. Great art inspires me all the time. It's why I love reading your work, and it's also why I like going to art museums, enjoying paintings and drawings, and playing video games. Substack truly has been a game changer for me as well. And as I always say, I'm blown away by the talent of this community, and Javier himself is also exceptionally talented, as we heard earlier in this week's Power Up prompt. So thank you, Javier, for that excellent input. Jennifer Jorgen says, I honestly get inspired by anything and everything. I see some random thing on TV, or someone says something, or I read something in the news, or in a book. Anything can be inspiration. I have a story I wrote because I was inspired when I plucked a chin hair. No joke. I think anything can be a story if you tell it right. It's just about taking what you see or experience and figuring out how to twist it to make it your own. I love that example about the chin hair, but it's true. Anything can become inspiration if you find the story that lies within it. Great points from Jennifer. Next up, Murphy Carpenter says, reading is my happy place and daily walks. And yes, both great points. Great writers are also great readers, and walks can be really helpful for a lot of things, inspiration included. Next up, Ashes of Poetry says, I get inspiration from a lot of places, most notably from my own desires, like asking myself what I'd do if I didn't care about anyone else. Also from my fears. A lot of my horror comes from things I'm afraid of happening, and a few are based on my actual life. Letting go of what others may think is a great piece of advice here. In your mind, the world is malleable. The rules are your own. Don't shackle your own potential. And yes, horror is certainly more authentic when it's based on our own fears and experiences. So that's a very good point as well, even if we wish we didn't have to pull from those things sometimes. Next up, Brenda, a voice that wonders, says, where do I get my inspiration from? Well, we're full-time travelers in our awesome motorhome. The view, watching people, my cat and dog, but most of it all here. This amazing place where you hear these amazing voices. Of course, one sure way to get my inspiration is from myself. My journey has been such an insane, silly, sad, exciting one. I love this. The idea of traveling the world in a motorhome is so inspiring on its own, but Brenda brings up some excellent points about just existing in places and watching other people go about their lives. It can inspire ideas based on the snippets of stories that you see. Wonderful input. Next up, author John G. Dyer says, I get up at 5 o'clock and watch the sun come up. And I'll say this, I'm not a morning person, but a sunrise is definitely a surefire way to get inspired. And next, J. Allen Winchester says, my cosmos hits me like a meteor when I'm minding my own business with story ideas, but when I need inspiration to flesh them out, I listen to music. Specifically, Two Steps from Hell, a cinematic background music style. I do know them, and they are fantastic. The company that has actually made some popular music too, like How to Train Your Dragon and one from Trollhunters. They've helped me get through the worst writer's block and finish so many manuscripts. I probably wouldn't have so many on my Inkitt profile if not for music. And music's a great one. I listen to thousands and thousands of hours of music and podcasts a year because I work from home, and it constantly inspires me. And on a side note, I love Trollhunters. Great series. Awesome. Well, thank you again to everyone who submitted input for this week's discussion. And remember, you can check out the week's topic on Wednesdays in my subscriber chat if you'd like to join the conversation. Okay, and without further delay, let's get into this week's featured guest interview. And this week, our guest is quite prolific on Substack. He's a poet and podcaster who's recently launched his own publishing label, and he has a haiku and poetry magazine in the works as well. So let's dive right in to this interview with our featured guest. All right, everybody, and this week on the Saved as Draft podcast, I'm really excited to announce to the show a fellow poet and podcaster. Please welcome Tim Jagodzinski. Tim, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far.
So I'm from Germany. If you interacted with me, you know I'm usually have like I think it's a time difference of 10 hours. And I started writing poetry when I was like a teenager. I think that's a good starting point for most people. And I had other hobbies, and it came back again on and off over my lifetime. So at some point you need to have like a professional career. So you start this, and at some point you have time, and you go back to poetry, and then things happen, and then you go back. So this is really like 25 years journey for me. And obviously I started writing German, and over time, because in Berlin we have a really international community, so you start automatically not to speak German, you speak English, and people complain in Berlin that you cannot learn German because when people notice you have an accent, they start speaking English. And so I started then to write in English, and at the end of last year I had like 1 month of vacation, and I decided, what can I do with my poetry? And I came to Substack. And now I published my book last week, and now I'm talking to you.
Amazing. So how long have you been on Substack then? Doesn't sound like it's been very long.
No, so it's basically like September, so it's like 9-10 months, something like that.
Got it. Yeah, so about the same as me. Yeah, so I was going to say, in your bio, you mentioned you've been writing poetry for 20 years. So my next question for you is, over the course of the time you've been writing poetry, what are some of the big lessons that you've learned, or some, kind of some of the big piece of advice you would give to fellow poets?
So I think the first lesson as a poet is you really need to be willing to be a misfit to a certain degree, to write good poetry. Because good poetry does not come from, and that's why I'm usually hacking on it, like, if you're not a misfit, you start to write in cliches, and you're going to write about the obvious. And I really think if you angle yourself to other people, and there's some like loneliness and solidarity, and you need to be a bit outside. And that will give you a viewpoint that's interesting to write about. I think this is one important lesson. You need to accept that it doesn't mean that you need to be a social outcast. It just means that you need to take that perspective. Another one is, and I think this is true for everything that's writing and maybe more arts, is like, you need to go out there. You cannot just sit at home and write. You need to go out there. You need to meet people. And I know people are annoying and they're problematic, and you have to like deal with them.
Right.
But a lot of people are also really nice. But this is how you get to better and new ideas what to write about. And I always tell people, if you have writer's block, go to a bar, drink a beer, and talk to strangers. That usually helps pretty well. And last but not least, I think it's really valuable to invest a lot into not necessarily just reading poetry broad, but just reading one person specific and going deep into them and trying to copy them a bit. And because this is how you find some guidance where you want to go. And it's a bit like, I compare everything to cooking. If you want to be a Michelin star cook, the first thing you do is you go on an apprenticeship with a Michelin star cook. And then when you learned enough about cooking from this person, you then you feel the fire inside of you, and you're like, now I want to create my own dishes. And I think this is a good approach if you start with poetry. Yeah.
Okay. No, I love that. I think that's really good advice, which makes me think then, what was that poet for you? Who was the one that you kind of dove deep into?
So it's long ago, and we have in Germany a poetic tradition. Like, German people are really arrogant about their language. They think like God came down and gave us German, which if you ever try to learn it, you might believe that. So, but I really I'm attracted to Rainer Maria Rilke. Like in English, you say Rilke, and he's one of the most famous poets from Germany. You have people like Goethe, but the thing is, if you talk Goethe, especially, it's like romanticism. It's like a move. It's not really my thing. But what Rilke did really is he moved away from this perspective of me and like this magical thinking and stuff like this. He really like wanted to write about the world, and like he created this thing, the Dinggedichte, and I term it now like third person poetry. You will hear that come up more often. And what really captured me was this poem, The Panther, about the panther in a cage. And really this perspective of the panther, taking this perspective of the panther. And that's really interesting. And that's where I went deeper in. Another poet I went deeper in, and I remember that because I read everything he wrote, which is it's like really dense, is Heinrich Heine. Like he's really a classic German poet. But what makes him interesting, he's still like in romanticism, but he was really a political poet also. Like he actually lived in exile in France because he couldn't really live in Germany, back then, especially in Prussia. And people went to prison because they read his poems in public. And he published poetry in a newspaper where Karl Marx was like the editor and stuff like this. So this is also a really interesting thing. And I think that's also something that we should consider again now, is like, how can we write poetry that is more about just us and maybe can have an impact on society?
I think that's a really good point. Yes, absolutely. So something else I noticed in your bio, and you brought it up already as well, you speak and write both German and English, right? And you mentioned in your bio that English is your favorite language. So I mean, I'm someone who's I've only ever spoke English. I don't know any other languages, but I think it's fascinating, being a bilingual person like that you have a favorite language. So I was curious, what is it about English, versus like German that like how does that work for you as a writer?
I think it's a bit. If you speak a second language, it's a bit also being like a second person. At least it feels like you're somebody different. And so maybe I grew up with being German, and then I found myself in writing English. And I mean, one aspect also why I wanted to write English was I can just reach many more people, and that's important for me. So I'm not just writing for myself in that regard. But also English it's a simpler language in a way. It's easier to construct things. And it's also, I think, what makes it cool is English is not just one language. English is like really international. And English has a lot of varieties that you can choose and pick from, and like many accents and there's a tool on the internet where you can it gives you multiple choice questions, how you would say something or write something, and then tells you where you learned English. So I think this is a really interesting aspect of the language. And that's why it became my favorite over time, just because it's something I can easily share. It's a persona I created in a way, and I can reach a lot of people with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like I said, it was interesting to hear. I wanted to hear your perspective as someone who speaks more than one language. So I like that a lot. So kind of shifting gears a little bit here. As I mentioned in your intro, you're also a podcaster. You have a podcast called A Poetry Podcast where you interview other poets. So I'm curious, how has that experience been for you? Do you have any kind of favorite interviews that you've done thus far?
So I cannot say that I have a favorite interview.
Sure.
If I say I have a favorite interview, I wouldn't put that on the other people I don't mention. So, and I don't think really I have a favorite interview.
Sure.
Because what I really learned from doing these is I feel like I made a lot of friends. You talk to the people, you understand them a bit better.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the podcasts, in the past they were like 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, but sometimes it was like a discussion over like 90 minutes or longer. So I learned a lot about the people. And I think this is the most interesting thing. And that's why I thought about it. And I reorganized the podcast a bit. So the next season will come out soon and the podcast will be longer. I expect that fewer people will listen, but what I really enjoy about the podcast is the discussion. And I want to have it more raw and get it out. And yeah, really, that's my favorite thing about it. It's just talking to new people and learning to know people. And especially a subject, I see somebody who does something interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I just, hey, I want to talk to you. And instead of me like, I just want your time, I tell them, hey, I have a podcast.
Right.
Then you have like a good argument to talk to them.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, I think that I think I would wholeheartedly agree because I've been doing interviews now for a while on this podcast, and it's one of those things where it's You can read a ton of someone's work, but until you actually talk to them, you don't really see kind of beneath the surface, significantly like how they are as a person and how that informs their work. So that's really cool. So you mentioned that your upcoming season, the episodes will be longer. Are you just adding kind of more questions, or are you kind of switching up the structure of the interviews, or what's creating that extra length?
So I'm not doing the podcast like you're doing it. I think we have two different styles.
Yeah.
I prepare some broad topics like a mind map, and I go with that into the interview and just want to have a longer discussion. And so there's usually a lot of things that we discuss, and you can cut out a lot of things. But in the beginning, so the extra content comes from it already exists more or less. So it is there. But with season 1, I was really keen to how can I get more people and more viewers, more listeners? How can I make this more successful? And I thought about it. What I rather would do now is make it more about the guest and make it more. I rather have fewer people listening to it because it's no longer, but have a more real experience and have the listener learn more about the people in the podcast and get the same feeling about the discussion than I do, and not trim it for most exposure and fastest listening. So this is really the big difference. And the content is already there.
Right.
Because, as I said, I talk extensive. I'm a person, I never stop talking. So so that's also, I got to usually I get to 21 minutes from 90 minutes by just talking out 1 hour of me talking. So
right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I'm looking forward to that. I personally like the longer podcasts, but I know, like you said, sometimes the shorter ones, just given the attention span on the internet these days, those tend to, I guess, get more listens.
I think the question is, if you're a big podcaster and people know it's worth listening to you for an hour, they will make time for that. But if you're somebody like me, and I think we're quite successful, I think I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
But if there's a new person, there's a podcast, and you want to try it, and it says 90 minutes, you're like,
yeah.
So that was my goal. But yeah, so as I said, I made the trade-off. I think it's more valuable to have a more authentic experience than having more people.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. I'm looking forward to that. So next up, I wanted to talk about your new book, and specifically the publisher of the book, Tilt Publishing, which, as I talked to you before the episode here, is your publishing house that you started. Is that right?
Yes, don't call it publishing house. That sounds really serious. Yeah, you wrote me tonight, and I was waking up at 3 a.m. and saw your message and I answered you. So, how that came to be is I wanted to publish my book, and to me it was really clear I'm not going to find a classic publisher. That's not realistic, and I didn't want to put the effort in. Even if let's say I had the best poetry book in the world, it would be a lot of effort to get somebody to publish it. And then it's also not less work in the end to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And I thought about how to do that, and self-publishing obviously is a thing. And I also thought about the things I do on Substack, especially as I support other poets.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, how can I take my experience and longer term create something that will also benefit other people? So I thought, okay, I can do the self-publishing. I will just create my little own label, because I also have a poetry magazine coming up, and so I can put it there.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, when I think I'm ready, I will also open it up for other people. So I can, hey, I like your poetry. Let's figure out how we can get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily to make money, but helping people to get out. Because I have 5 years of experience. I had an apprenticeship in media design.
Okay.
And a bit of marketing.
Yeah.
So I can actually create these things. And I know a lot of people I talk to that I want to publish and even want to self-publish, but I don't really know how to know it. And if you do it with Vellum, for example, and EPUB, I put it in, if you download the bundle, that's in the bundle, because I think people readers should read it, but to be honest, I think it's really ugly. So I don't like that. And so I want to find a way to help people like that. And another reason is I really want to figure out how we can monetize poetry in a realistic way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if I have my own publishing options, I can do that. And last thing, why I split it up from my Cerulean Hughes thing, is I made a clear distinction. So my Substack, my Cerulean Hughes thing, it's about me. It's more or less non-commercial. There I do what I want to do, and if you want to support me, you can do that. And Tilt really is, here's the stuff where I try to be a bit more commercial. That's also a good split for me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that you have experience as an apprenticeship in marketing and media design, because one thing I noticed right off the bat is how professionally laid out and designed your poetry collection is. It's very impressive.
Thank you.
So that it makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah. And I really think, and I put a note on, and I think probably liked this. I think the presentation of the poem is as important as the poem itself.
Yes.
It's obviously we want to argue that the content is the most important thing, and that is true. But the question is always, how do you get people to experience the content?
Yeah.
As an artist, you kind of want people to go in there.
Right.
And also, I think it sends a message, and it also creates a theme around the poetry. So, my book is set in Garamond, and it's like, if you look at the full-size version, you see there's a lot of white space and it's really centered. And I really want to like frame it that way. And that's why I said EPUB is ugly, because EPUB is really like you have no control. The best you can do is hope that it doesn't look bad. So.
Right. Yeah, I personally was looking at the full-size version when I was writing your interview questions here, and I did notice that intentional kind of white space that you had in there. And to bring back to bring back a food metaphor, they always say with food you eat with your eyes first, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important, like you said, that poetry is framed visually in a certain way. And yeah, so as we kind of dive into your book here, which is titled Anti-Human Conditioning, I was just curious, in the preface of the book, you talk about the human condition and how the pieces were, written during your search for it. But I was curious, could you just kind of dive a little bit deeper into what inspired the collection and kind of like your journey as you put it together and wrote all those poems?
So with the year in Substack, I really changed my perspective on what I wanted to do. Poetry-wise, and I decided to before I started Substack, my idea was to just create the book, and the book was supposed to be called Cerulean Hues. That's my Substack now,
right?
But then I was like, hey, maybe I should first like get some people and check out if they're actually interested in that. So, and then over time of working with Substack and reading what people write on Substack and their poetry and all these things, and also going deeper back into poetry because I took a long break, I decided that I want to write new poetry, like this third person poetry. I want to get out of my head, so to say.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the book was to take what I have right now, put it in a book, and have it as a symbol of a door that's closing and a door that's opening up. So I put it out now, and now I can do my next journey and go there. And I called it anti-human conditioning because we all had like childhoods, and we have trouble with that. And what I noticed is, if you read the book, it's not strictly ordered by that, but you also see the chapters. It starts with alienation, then it's transformation, then it's nature, and then it's love, and then it's human condition. Human condition is just one poem, and this is like the kind of the change I felt in my life. So I felt really alienated, and I think that is something that many people do and that we share. And so I thought, okay, I was conditioned like this. You grow up with the people around you, and I decided it's like the anti-human conditioning. I'm not conditioned to be a human, what can I do myself to condition myself to be a human? And that's obviously, for everybody who's listening, that's your own decision. You can define that yourself. And I decided what I need to do to go there is to go out of my head. And that's why you have this transition from alienation, transformation. And in transformation, the poetry is really about usually standing in front of a huge task, seeing something opening up, like Grand Rape is like, the drape goes up and you're standing there and you see all the light, and like this anticipation and the fear. Then when I thought about it, I want to go back to nature, so we start with nature. And then if you recondition yourself, then you can go to love again. That's the idea behind it.
Okay. No, I love that. Yeah. I noticed right off the bat, how you had everything structured, and I love hearing like the story behind those different choices as far as the chapters goes. It makes complete sense when you map it out like that. So my next question is, do you have and it doesn't have to be just one, but do you have kind of like a favorite poem from the collection, one that like really stands out to you amongst all of them?
I read everything so often, like you get actually, to pick it up again, you get alienated with your own poetry when you create a book.
Yeah.
I really like the one with the eyes, in the beginning. It's one of the first ones.
Yeah.
It's also the last one I actually wrote for the book. And it's really when I noticed, when you go out and people watch you, and it annoys you when they see you, and you don't want to be seen.
Yeah.
And so, and I feel we shouldn't, I mean myself, but I wish that for everybody, we should move into a direction where we want to be seen because we feel good about ourselves.
Right.
That's why I think that's my favorite.
Okay.
'Cause it's like
Okay.
the impetus.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say too, as I've been reading through it, one of the poems I think in the first chapter that really stood out to me that I've been thinking about a lot is it was called Waterlogged, and there was a line towards the end where you had made a comment about it was like the comparison of knocking on wood and how wood sounds hollow, and how you want to get to a point where you're not knocking on your soul and it sounds hollow. I think is I'm paraphrasing, but that was just such a powerful image, and I'd never seen anything quite like it. So that one really stood out to me so far. Yeah, I loved that one.
Yeah, this is like this. This is the weird thing about, I think, getting better with how we feel is, you need to see the things in yourself, and you need to notice them, and then you need to make a decision that you move forward. But I think the reason why many people can't really effectively move forward is because they can't let go. That is a really important part of that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. And so another thing I wanted to ask you about in regards to the book is obviously the photographs in there. They're amazing. I assume the some of them are photos of you when you were a kid, right? That's what I kind of got. But then obviously other ones are just kind of like different subjects, different locations and settings. Did you take all the photographs yourself?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah. So as a photographer, then I'm curious, what's your approach to photography? Like, how do you kind of get inspired to take some of these photos? How do you like frame the shot? What's going through your mind?
So the photography came in because of the change I decided to do to be more third person poetry. Okay. And so you need to learn to see things because it's really easy not to see things. It's going back to cooking. If you give somebody who is not experienced with tasting food a really complex meal, they struggle with tasting it, or with wine, the thing, this pretentious wine. So
right.
I decided to take photography, and I have more plans with that. Maybe we talk about this later. But how do I frame the shot? I really try to find things that other people won't necessarily wouldn't see, but that is there and that's kind of obvious. Or things that tell a story. Like I have this picture, there's this guy on a horse, like killing the lion. It's in Berlin in front of the, I think it's a history museum, one of the museums is public. And I have it from two perspectives, and one perspective is more from how the person strikes the lion, and one is from behind the lion. And you see this is in the beginning of transformation. The idea is like a perspective change.
Okay.
So this was the idea behind that. And yeah, how to frame a shot. I think when you frame a shot, first of all, try as many frames as possible. Don't it's the same with poetry. Like if you want to do one thing really well, you get too focused on. Like try to frame a bit, try to play with a bit with randomness and with exposure. Obviously, I add the pictures a bit. Especially with a picture, you don't need to be the framing. It's the easiest to fix mostly with digital photography. Okay. If you take a picture on film, okay, then you need to get the framing right. You cannot just upload it and
right.
So yeah, and this is how I think it. Like I really want to picture things in the world. There's no strategy. My strategy is I take the train and go places and see what I can find to photograph. That's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, just kind of explore and see what catches your eye, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So something else you mentioned in the book, I think right at the beginning, you encourage people to kind of get inspired by the photographs themselves and to write their own pieces and share them with you. I wanted to call that out as well because I thought that was really cool. And again, the photography is so good. I could see people, myself included, being inspired by some of those photographs. So I guess my next question would be, kind of looking to the future here. You mentioned, that this book is kind of one door closes and another opens. I really like that metaphor. And then you also brought up, obviously, with this new publisher here that you've started a magazine as well. So I'm just curious, what's going on for you for the rest of 2025 here? What's on the horizon?
It's so much. So I decided to like renovate everything. I'm not sure if I get everything done, but I usually work on 2 things at the same time. And like for cerulean hues, which is like my private thing, and then I will talk about tilt.
Yeah.
So what I'm working on right now is I want to take I thought about poetry prompts, and you see a lot of poetry prompts, and I think I understand why people do them because they're really easy, fast content.
Yeah.
We can like, come up with some words, and I think I thought about how can I create a better poetry prompt with the pictures. That's kind of the idea.
Right. Yeah.
So what I will do is I will create a collection of pictures. I already started with that, and I will, first of all, the introduction will explain to you how can you get things out of the picture to write about. Because I notice a lot of people when I talk to them, it's like, for them it's easy to write about themselves. But they like, if I would ask them to write about whatever, something there, they're like, I don't know how to do it. So this is something I will want to train people, is to see things. Because you pick that up, like how do I take the pictures is by learning to see. And this goes back to Rilke, who wrote really mediocre poetry until he met a friend who is a sculptor, and he told him, you need to learn to see the world as a painter or as a sculptor, and then you will write better poetry. Because how do you want to write about the world if you cannot see the world?
Right.
And as a painter, you sit there for hours and hours and you watch this. Let's take the Panther, for example. You sit in front of the Panther and paint it, and you watch and you paint and you watch. And as a poet, we tend to like write something down and then that's good. And so that is what I want to do with this. And it will come with like mind maps and explanations, and we talk a bit about colors, and I will also provide you with poetry that I wrote about it. And so this will be one piece of content, and it will be the third one. Yeah. Because I'm posting the poetry, I'm posting this and the podcast. And also, I'm currently working on a thing that is called Poetic Objects. I like have this, I don't know if you saw that, like I started doing simple pictures. I have like this white box where I can really isolate an object and just take a photo of it and how it changes. And I want to take things I find on the street and take them home and take detailed pictures of them, and really want to go into structures, into textures and stuff like this that you find. Because that's another thing. We always dream about going to Mars, but there's so much wondrous stuff just laying on the ground, like some fruit. You take it up, and if you go really deep into, like, it has like texture, and then there's like the internal stuff, like you can see it through the skin and stuff like this. So this is another thing that goes in the same direction that I want to pick up. For tilts, one thing I'm working on right now is a branding guide.
Okay.
I want to give people an option where they just, because Substack, like, how do you brand yourself? What are your options? Besides the fact that the UI is changing, it seems now every day.
Yeah, right.
Like, where can I go? And then like I will give a little interact, like which pictures can I upload? What does make sense? Like, for example, there's a good question about the email headers, and I thought about them. I think email headers, you're better off not having them.
Yeah,
they're not really useful, for example, and stuff like this. And they give you also. I will start with explaining how to pick a color, how to pick a font, stuff like this, because I also know people struggle with that. So this is a simple thing. Then the next thing that is in October, the Big Fat Toad will come out. It's a haiku and short poetry magazine. It's not coming out in print right now because that's not feasible currently.
Yeah,
especially because most of you like in the US and I'm in Germany. So if I ship it over, you're gonna need it's too expensive mostly.
right.
I just like the idea of a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeters. I don't know, it's like 4 inches or something like that. By 4 inches, a book with one small poem and one per day. And so I can like read a haiku. And I take submissions for that right now. I already have submissions. People can still do that. And that's a Big Fat Toad that will come out then in October. And in January, I plan, it's called Fleur de Sel. Fleur de Sel it's like French. It's like flour out of salt. It's a kind of salt that on the sea, they have like pools of water and they condense the water down and then the salt crystallizes as Fleur de Sel. And the idea of this is like to be a really fucking pretentious. I'm allowed to say that.
That's okay. Yeah, you're fine. Yep.
The idea is to like really, really be really pretentious with this one. And the challenge I put for people there, I would ideally love people to send in a picture and a poem they wrote about it. Let's see how that works out, because I know how submissions work. People write something and then submit it, and asking people to write something specific for a magazine might be a bit complicated. But I also allow people to just submit the poem. but the rule with this is I want it in third person. I want you to write about something else, not about you.
Okay. Yeah.
Submit with that. And this will be the next thing that comes out. And I think Further Soul will be a quarterly thing, and the Big Fat Toad is supposed to be a monthly thing.
Okay.
And so these are the two things I want to put out. And yeah.
Okay.
Lots of things.
Yeah. No. Excellent. Yeah. I love the sound of all of it. So.
Oh, I forgot one thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm doing the Steve Jobs thing. Oh, there's one more thing.
Right.
I'm currently translating Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke. I think that's like a favorite read of many.
Okay.
And I saw that the most read English version lacks, for example, the letters of the person who wrote to him.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of at that. And I published this as an open source translation. So if you want to write about it, you can just take my translation for free and use that in your articles. Because Rilke's original stuff is public domain, but obviously the translations are not. So I want to allow people to write about Rilke and have a translation where they know they're not trampling any rights. And I will move forward and also do this with his poems. And I also then will publish this as a book. And then let's see. So this is the last thing. Because I want to also do more about Rilke, but that is more something I will.
Yeah,
weave into
absolutely.
Things.
I love that. That sounds amazing. So, when it comes to submissions, where should people go to submit to some of these projects of yours? Is it through Substack or is it through your publishing website?
You can go to tiltiltilt.com
Okay.
or to bigfattoad.com or
Okay.
to flirtsoul.com.
Okay.
It all goes to the same thing.
Okay.
And I have submission forms where you can enter everything and submit. And
Okay.
that's the best way. Or you can write an email. The submission form is probably better.
Okay, perfect. No, yeah, I wanted to ask because I'm going to include obviously a link to that in the show notes for this episode here when your interview debuts. Okay, so yeah, this brings me to my last question, which is I wanted to ask, given all of your experience and everything that you're working on here, what's some advice you would share to a brand new poet who just got to Substack or someone who's trying to get started with poetry? They're very much a beginner. What are some pieces of advice from a seasoned poet like yourself that you would kind of, give them?
So one thing I would consider something that's the most important thing is you cannot do this by discipline and you cannot do this by motivation. It must be a thing about dedication. And this is something I learned in the last weeks. And the difference is dedication, motivation you can lose and then you're not motivated.
Yeah.
Discipline is mostly just made up by, look at me, bald people with angry faces aiming at you.
Right.
Discipline is it's a bit like medicine. You need discipline because something else doesn't work. That's my perspective on it. But I think dedication is the thing where you come back to it, where it makes you come back to. So you really need to get this. You need to be, as I said, fine with being a misfit, not fitting in.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, that is important, if you want to be successful, you cannot fit in. And with not fitting in, I mean, you cannot fit in even with other poets. You need to be your own thing. Because if you think about it, we have so many poems and poets, and most of them are not successful. So if you want to be successful, obviously you have to figure out and do something different and not be led by the other people. And that is not to say that the other people do something wrong, but you need to find your own way, your own thing. And I would say overall, think about other people more than you think about yourself, and think about how you can be a transformative force. Because I think this is where the success actually comes from. It's from creating something that changes another person, and so it becomes a part of their life. Like Rilke, the Panther, I always come back to the poem, and I always see it from another perspective. And if you want to create something like this, you need to think about other people. When it comes to your writing skill, there's this advice of reading a lot, and I wouldn't say necessarily that is wrong, but I think the problem I see is with reading a lot, as people say reading a lot, they mean read a lot of books and tell people how many books you read. Read the next, read the next, read the next, read the next. I much rather would see somebody reading the same book again and again and again and again, because the book is changing over time, it's changing you with your experience. You change your notes, and rather don't go too far and too broad, and focus on something in the beginning. And as I said earlier, if you need to start with copying somebody. And if you find somebody that resonates with you, and they were on some kind of mission. I mean, if you resonate with Bukowski, you might like don't do it. But you need to find this resonation with a person like that. Also, really important. I would suggest find somebody who's dead for you.
Okay, right.
Because living people tend to disappoint you. They will do something stupid. If the person is dead, at least you all know everything they already did. But that's not necessary. But I think that is also important because there's so many people with internet celebrities, they get crazy and suddenly like, oh, this person I would like. So you want to avoid that. And also, there's this idea of finding your voice, finding yourself, finding whatever. And going back to letting go, let go of finding yourself, finding your voice. Like just be a thing. Be a force of nature. Don't let the world happen to you. Try to happen to the world.
Okay.
And when people say like find your voice, it's always like this advice, like be yourself. And like how can I be somebody else? You can't. And so you don't need to find your voice, you already have it, you just need to develop it. Also important, technique is really important. Even if you decide that you want to write free verse, your free verse will become much, much better if you know about technique, especially when it comes to rhythm. I think rhythm is really important. Where poetry comes from is making it easier to remember by having a rhythm in it and rhymes and stuff like this. So obviously, if you can put that in, people will remember it more. And work on making things beautiful. Maybe that is my most important advice, and maybe I should leave it at that. Is something being beautiful in itself is enough value. You don't need to make it meaningful. But if you want to create something meaningful, you need to make it beautiful so people get it. You don't reach to the hearts of people with giving them just something meaningful that doesn't look well. This is a bit like trying to feed your kids broccoli, It's good. It's good, but you need to package it well.
Right.
And usually what I get as a pushback here is like, but I want to do my own thing. I'm an artist. I need to do my own expression. And to that I say, as an artist, you have like a coin with two sides. One side is stuff you want to do, and the other side is the things you want to achieve. And these are two different things. So you can always decide, I'm doing what I want, I'm doing a bit for that. And there's also the aspect of commercial success. And there is never, if you decide I want to do a bit more commercial, you do a bit of commercial. If you want to do a bit more you do it on your own. There is no, it's not a monolithic decision to do one or the other.
Right.
So my decision to writing from the third person perspective doesn't mean that I cannot write first person poetry. If I feel like I have a great idea, I'm going to do it anyway. But I can come back to that. So don't get caught in the middle of this doing something so people like me, or I do this, and this. Just ignore that. Just do what feels right for you in a moment, but have a goal in mind. I think so. Okay, I always extend my stuff. I told you I'm talking forever, but maybe when it comes to making money, I think this is an important topic. Make a decision. Do you want to write as a hobby and don't make any money and attention is not important to you?
Right.
Then do that. Or decide, hey, even if it's unrealistic or you never achieve it, if you say, I want to make this into something professional, I want to do it long term, I want to earn some money, and if it's just additional income, maybe I retire at some point and have additional income that way or something like that, make that decision. I think most people get really unhappy, and I saw this on Substack, where they don't make this decision and they kind of want it to be a hobby, but they kind of dream of making it professional, but they kind of not. And then they activate paid subscriptions and then nobody subscribes and someone and they just caught in the middle of not knowing what they want, knowing what they want to go. And this really, really is in the way of what you're doing, because it's like I made a decision. I want to make some money. I want to make something valuable, but I also want to do my own things. So that's why I did the split.
Right.
But I made that's a decision. If I hadn't decided on that, I couldn't make the split, and in the end, everybody's worse off with it. So it's my actually last advice. Like make a clear decision, know where you want to go. You can change it, but make it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, no, I mean that's incredible advice. It's very clear that you've experienced a lot, that you've learned a lot. Like all of your advice in this interview, I think is really going to help a lot of people, myself included. I even learned a ton
Thank you.
about the art of poetry. So yeah, thank you again, Tim. I know, as you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, we have a huge time difference between us. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show here and talk about everything you got going on and to share such amazing advice. As I said, that was the last of my questions here, but yeah, just wanted to say thank you again. I'm really excited for
You're
people to
welcome.
hear this. Yeah, if there's an opportunity down the road for me to come onto your podcast, I would love to do that at some point as well.
I already planned for that, so you have to come now.
Okay, perfect. Well, there we go. It's locked in stone.
I think I already announced you, so you don't have an option.
Okay, great. Well, that works
Don't
for me.
disappoint my fans, please.
I would never do that. All right, Tim. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, and a big thank you to Tim again for coming onto the show. Be sure to check out his podcast as well. I'll include links to everything Tim has going on in the show notes. All right, and now it's time for a look at next week on Substack. So next week I've got a few things in the works, but first and foremost, I'm going to try and finish that horror miniseries that I started a little while back called An Hour to Anywhere. I have parts 1 and 2 out, and there's a few more steps in that series before we get to the end, so stay tuned. Tomorrow we'll bring a new power-up prompt as well, and the poll this week decided on crime noir as our genre. I'm really excited for this one because I'm a fan of movies and comics like Sin City and games like Max Payne and LA Noire, so this should be a fun one. Expect that tomorrow morning. Next week, we'll also bring a post outlining my plans for the October Writing Challenge. Should I reveal the name here? That's the question. Okay, fine, I will. But I won't be providing any details until that post goes live, so I gotta keep some mystery. So here's your announcement then, and a thank you for listening to the podcast this far. Beginning October 1st, the Writer's Journey will be hosting a horror-themed writing challenge entitled Domain of the Devourer, the First Indulgence. If you're wondering who this Devourer is, I'd recommend checking out my story, A Living Legend. And that's all I'll say for now. Stay tuned for more information next week. And that's it for today's episode. Thanks again for being here, for sharing your work, and for joining me on this show each week. I hope you all have a wonderful and productive week of writing. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off. No, I mean, I get it, I do, but I just think it could be, I don't know, a little more subtle. Okay, yeah, no, you're right, you make a good point. Okay, all right, I'm excited to read it.